A million thoughts started to race through Quinn's mind. Had they found out about his ability? Were they going to force him to give it up and hand it over? Or had Loop informed them that he had killed Brandon and they were now going to punish him for it? Although Quinn was trying his best to calm down, it was nearly impossible. As he sat in the seat, he could feel his heart beating as if it was trying to escape from his chest. "Boy, calm down," Leo said. "I think even the others can hear your heartbeat. Now before we begin, I would like to inform you of a few things." The sergeant said, "A student by the name of Brandon Richardson has passed away recently. Now your teacher here has informed me that he and another student named Fei Lan had attacked you during combat classes yesterday. Now, not only has one of the students passed away, but Fei was also admitted to the hospital late last night. So it was something to do with Brandon's death after all. We currently have no leads to what happened to Brandon, so that eventually led us to you. Although it's hard to believe someone with no ability like you could do something like this, there's always a way. The woman sitting opposite you here has the ability to detect whether someone is telling the truth or not. Now please proceed with her demands." "It's okay," the lady said. "I just need you to place your hand over mine." As Quinn placed his hand over hers, he suddenly felt a calming feeling enter his body. An ability has been detected, unable to block the user's ability. "Now tell me, did you kill Brandon Richardson last night?" she asked. The calming feeling allowed Quinn to answer naturally. He felt like he was suddenly floating on top of clouds. "No, I did not." The woman carried on holding Quinn's hand and eventually let go. "He's telling the truth. As I said, I couldn't believe he would do something like this." Leo said, "I mean, how would it even be possible? He's only a level 1. It looks like we no longer have any leads. It's a shame, but an accident like this happens from time to time. It is expected." The sergeant said, "I'm sorry for wasting your time. Feel free to head back to class." With the questioning over, the two guards grabbed Leo and Quinn by the arm once again, and a few moments later were teleported back to the weapons hall. "Boy, your heartbeat was starting to give me doubts that you were hiding something," said Leo, "but I'm glad you were not the culprit, otherwise I would have lost a promising student." With that said, Leo started to walk around the room and give advice out to the other students. That's when Layla had come over to where Quinn was. "What happened? Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it seems like it will be for now at least," Quinn replied. Quinn explained to Layla what had happened at the integration. At first, she was even shocked to hear that Brandon had died, but was happy to find out that Quinn was now completely cleared of suspicion. But as she thought about it more, she started to think who in their right mind would be crazy enough to kill a student, and for what reason. "Hey Quinn, you might not like what I'm about to say, but do you think maybe Vorden did it? What makes you say that? Did something happen between Vorden and Brandon / No, I mean, is it not strange that Vorden approached you in the first place? He's a level 5 user while you're just a level 1, and when he attacked me the other day, he kept shouting about you. And trust me, the guy seems crazy enough to do something like that. Really, but why? It's not like me and Vorden have known each other for long. Do you really think anyone would go to the extreme just for something like this? Yeah, even if I do think he's crazy, I don't think he's that crazy." With that, the two continued to practice their combat classes. Although Quinn was trying his best to learn the hammer strike move, he couldn't concentrate. He kept thinking about the words that Layla had said. Right now, there were no suspects to Brandon's death, and Vorden had acted oddly a few times. And the last thing was the fact that Vorden wasn't in his room when Quinn arrived back last night. Just what was he doing so late? As the combat classes had ended, Layla and Quinn decided to hang out with each other for a while. There were a few tests both of them wanted to do with Quinn's ability. Quinn wanted to find a way to stop the sun from affecting him and learn about it more, while Layla wanted to see if there was any way she could be turned into a vampire. But as they walked out of the weapons hall and out onto the ground floor, them and several other first-year students had been stopped. The people stopping them were second-year students, and they had asked all the first-year students to gather at the assembly hall. "Just what is going on?" Layla said. "I have no idea," Quinn replied. Of course, the second-year students were powerful, and the first-year students had no choice but to agree. Even the higher power levels had agreed to come, afraid something might happen. Around 100 of the first-year students had gathered in the assembly hall. Around them was not a single teacher, but just several of the second-year students. Up on the stage, The curtains were drawn, and in front of it stood Momo. "Welcome, every single one of you," Momo said. "Today we have a special event, a special message to all you first years. You see, there's been someone going around trying to go against us, thinking he can break the precious system that has been around for years in this school. I am here to tell you that this is what happens to those who do not obey." Momo pulled down on a piece of string, and the curtains on the stage started to be opened up. As the curtains moved away slowly, it started to reveal a student who had been tied up and placed on a large piece of wood. The student was bloody and had markings of being beaten everywhere. "Warden," Quinn said. Finally, the first-year students had gathered in the assembly hall as asked. There was chatter amongst themselves as there seemed to be no sign of any teachers and only the second-year students. It was easy to tell the difference between years with students, as there was a rank embed on their shirt that told the difference. "Is everyone here?" Momo asked. "Yes, everyone from Dell's class and the weapons combat class should be here. Let's start the show then." At that moment, Momo pulled a piece of string, pulling back the curtains, revealing what was behind them. As the curtains were drawn, a badly beaten-up Vorden was on display, tied to a large wooden plank. Just then, several of the second-year students pulled out carts that seemed to be filled with large black circular stones. Momo picked up one of the round balls and held it in his hand. "This here is a metal ball that had been embedded with the power of a beast crystal," said Momo. "When the Earth had found a way to mix the beast crystal with our own weapons, it was a turning point in the war. But what they don't teach you as first years is that beast weapons need to be activated with your ability. Once activated, they can give out extra power. The higher the beast crystal used to make the weapon, the higher the power." Quinn, watching the whole thing, couldn't help but look at the badly beaten-up Vorden. He was wondering how on earth Momo could stand there and talk so casually as if he was giving a presentation to the whole class. "So us second years have decided to give you from the beast weapons class and some of you other first-year students a shortcut. Today we will show you how to activate a beast weapon using these balls." That's when a first-year student raised his hand to ask a question. Excuse me, but does any of the teachers know about this?" For a moment, there was silence. Even the first years couldn't believe why someone would ask that in this situation. It was obvious that this was being done behind the teachers' backs. Then a second-year student had come from the side of the assembly hall and immediately punched the student who asked the question in the face. The second-year student repeatedly punched the person until he eventually passed out. "Are there any more questions?" Momo asked. The first-year students stood there silent in fear. They didn't want to say anything, especially after they had seen what happened to the boy who had just asked a question. "Good," Momo said before continuing. "Now to explain, these beast stones here were made with the purpose to help you activate your equipment, so, to be honest, they're quite useless, but they are handy for demonstrating. Just like when you activate your ability in your body, you need to concentrate on the ball in front of you. Think of it as a part of your body and focus your ability on it." The stone ball being held in Momo's hand suddenly went from a black to a green color. Now, usually your weapons wouldn't change color when activated, but as I said earlier, these balls are used just for the sake of helping you learn how to activate your weapons. Once the color has changed, that means it has been activated and its strength has increased. Now today, we will be practicing target hitting. The second-year students then moved Vorden down from the stage and onto the floor with the other first-year students. "The board here is special, you see. Even a bullet wouldn't be able to penetrate through it. Only the power of a beast weapon can. So today's lesson is to throw the ball and hit the target. Simple, right? What, is this really allowed? Won't we get into trouble for doing something like this?" "What do you mean? The teachers don't care when we got beat before. Why would they care about something like this now? The second years are doing this only because they know they can get away with it. They have been here longer than us." Momo started to look at the crowd when his eyes finally had met with Quinn's. "Oh, I almost forgot. The crazy boy here has been targeting us second years one by one, thinking we wouldn't notice. Not only did he not heed our warning, but he completely ignored it and came after us. We dealt with him in this very hall back then, but he still didn't listen. Now, this is a warning to you all. This is what happens to those who try to disrupt the flow in school." The second years then poured out the crates of black bee stones, and they all fell out and rolled onto the ground floor. There were more than enough stones there for each student to throw at least one ball of Warden. "Now who wants to go first?" One of the second students said. "Hurry now. If no one wants to volunteer, then I will just have to pick one of you." As expected, not a single person had volunteered. The students were cruel to those who were weaker to them, but not like this. Usually, it would be a case of just better treatment, but it seemed like the second years were targeting Vorden. Whatever Vorden had done, he really had annoyed them. "All right then, you the girl with the brown hair, you go first," the second-year student said as he put one of the balls in her hand. I can't," she said. "Really? Well, if you can't, then why don't we place you on the board instead?" The girl's face suddenly sunk. She was only a level 2 ability user, and she had taken her fair share of punishment, but this seemed too much, and she didn't want to be on the receiving end of it. The girl then started to look to around her side to see if anyone, a single person, would stand up for her, but they all looked away, trying to avoid eye contact. "Good. You know what to do now, right?" As the girl looked at the ball in her hand, she started to concentrate. The ball then started to light up the faintest shade of green possible. To be expected of only a level 2 user, a weak color. "Oh well, not to worry. If you throw hard enough, the ball will still hit its target, so don't worry. Now, if you hit the boy on the board, we will give you a perfect score." The female hesitated for a bit as she closed her eyes. "Throw it," the boy said, knowing that she could delay it no longer. She threw the ball with all her strength. However, the ball was heavy and managed to just fall short of where Vorden was, not even reaching him. "Get out of here," the boy said, and the female quickly left. Next, the next student was a male. He had the ability level of 2.5, but when he held the ball, it managed to change in color, more activating the Beast Core's powers. Unlike the female, the boy didn't hesitate as much, as he had much time to think about what he needed to do. He threw the ball hard, and the ball managed to hit Vorden straight in the stomach. The impact was hard, and Vorden coughed out blood over the floor. You see that now that was perfect. That is exactly how everyone should throw the ball. Layla and Quinn had been at the back this whole time watching everything. As they were one of the last ones to enter the room, and even though Layla had her grudges against Vorden, she knew this wasn't right. Those bastards, how could they do something like that? Quinn, go call Leo. If it's him, he might stop this mess. But as Layla turned around to look at where Quinn was, he was nowhere to be seen. "Pick me. I want to give it a try," Quinn said with a smile, standing at the front of the students. Just what was the crazy boy thinking? Layla was stunned as she watched Quinn. As Quinn volunteered himself next, Nano couldn't help but think he was up to something. He knew the two of them were friends, so why would he volunteer? In a way, this whole demonstration was to show the first years that they were to obey the second year's command. Every year it had become a sort of tradition at the academy. A similar thing had happened to them when they were first years, a display that there was a power far greater than them, and they were not to become cocky. To show them that there was something greater ahead, this would draw them to the fact that they needed more power. It would strive for them to work harder. It was never meant to get this far. At first, they had given Vorden a simple warning. Then Vorden was the one who first started to attack the second years. At the time, Nano and the others decided to show them his place. They dealt with Vorden on his own, or so they thought. He continued to disobey their commands and still came after weaker second-year students one by one. That's when they decided to punish him publicly. This way it would solve all future troublemakers and show them what happened to them. Quinn started to look around at all the second years in the room. There were a total of 8 second-year students standing by the edge of the hall, for on each side that had around 50 first-year students surrounded. There were also 2 students by Vorden, one on each side of the board. These students were the weakest of the bunch. Each of them had a power level 2 displayed on the watches. Even though they were second years, they all followed Momo, which meant they were weaker than him. There was the chance that they had already learned how to use a soul weapon, but it was unlikely. They had only just become second years, so there wasn't much chance for them to learn anything. However, the real problem was Momo and the people by his side. Momo stood there with the power level of 6, and the 2 beside him were level 4s. It was unlikely that any of the first years would help Quinn out, and even the strongest first year in the room was Erin, and even she was a level 5. It was no wonder, even though the first years outnumbered them, they were afraid. As Quinn held the ball in his hand, a message had appeared. Basic tier beast weapon, round ball. Would you like to activate? Strength of weapon will increase by 5%. The percentage stood out to him. It was the same number his gauntlets gave when using them. Perhaps Quinn didn't need to figure out how to activate the beast weapons, as Momo had said. It seemed like the system would do everything for him. Activate. The black ball started to glow. It glowed brighter than any of the balls the other students had held before. How is that possible? He was able to activate the basic tier weapon fully. Momo thought, that means its strength has increased by at least 5%. If he had a higher tier weapon, I wonder if he could the same. Wasn't he just a useless level 1? Quinn then walked in front of where Vorden was standing. There was now a good 5 meters of distance between the two. Why do we have these powers? Quinn said out loud. Isn't it to protect ourselves, to fight those who harm our friends and family? Vorden, hearing Quinn's words, started to lift his head. He had a feeling he knew what Quinn was planning to do. Quinn? No, don't. What are you doing? Vorden mumbled, but was unheard. I've taken a beating my whole life, and I was weak back then. What do I care if I take another beating now? Quinn then chucked the ball using all his strength as hard as he could. With the 16 points of strength and the added 5% power, the ball came out lightning fast as it left his fingertips. Instead of the ball hitting Vorden, though like everyone suspected, it landed straight in the student's stomach, standing by the side of the board. The power was so strong that the student was lifted off his feet and knocked out in one blow. 50 EXP gained. 175 of 400 EXP. What the hell are you guys doing standing there? Get him! Momo shouted. Quinn knew there wasn't much he could do against all the second-year students, so he wanted to create as much havoc as possible. The 2 level 4 students who stood by Momo's side started to come towards him, but instead of Quinn running toward them, he suddenly ran toward the crowd of first years behind him. He bent down and picked up 2 more of the black balls on the floor and started to head for the weaker students around the side, while weaving in between the first-year students. Then when he was within distance, he had found his targets. The weak level 2s were standing by the side. Once again, he threw out another 2 black balls, aiming for them at full strength. One of the students managed to avoid the black ball, but the other wasn't so lucky, getting hit and knocked out. 50 EXP gained. 225/400 EXP. This was Quinn's plan. So far, every level up Quinn was able to obtain an ability. He didn't know what he would get, but he sure hoped it would help him win the fight. There were enough second-year students for him to take on to cause a level up. He then went back into the crowd to pick up even more balls while making sure to use the other students as cover. What are you guys doing? To anyone who manages to hit or capture that guy, they will be free from any form of punishment. Mono said. The first-year students started to look at each other. They didn't want to be involved in the first place and were unsure of what to do. Why should we listen to you? Layla said, just a second ago you dealt with one of us for asking a question. Who knows whether we could trust you or not? Fine, you don't want to help? Attack them all. Just then, the 2 level 4 students who were chasing after Quinn no longer cared about injuring the first years. The 2 people started to gather up their abilities. One of them swung out their arm, and with it, a large line of water came out at them. But before it could even reach any of the students, an ice ball was shot out and froze the water attack in place, causing it to fall to the ground. The person responsible stepped forward and drew her sword out. I wasn't going to get involved, but you guys attacked me first, Aaron said. Even if you're a level higher than us, do you really think you can take on 2 level 4s? Just then an arrow came shooting out, aiming for one of the students, but before it could reach him, an earth wall was raised. She won't be alone, Layla said. To be honest, at first, Layla wasn't planning to get involved. If Quinn wanted to take a beating, there was no reason for her to get one with him. However, she too had experienced mistreatment in the school. Layla had no idea how strong Quinn really was, but felt like he must have had some sort of a plan to fight back, and it now looked like the first-year students were going to get hurt anyway. With Layla and Aaron distracting the other high levels in the room, Quinn felt like this was his chance to deal with the rest of the level 2s. However, it wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. Out from the side, a long, thin object came lashing out at him. This was too fast for Quinn to react, causing him to be hit across his body. Not only did the attack pierce his chest, but it also sent him tumbling to the ground. 13/20 HP. 7 points of HP with 1 attack. Just what was that? Quinn thought, looking at what had just hit him. Coming towards him was Momo. In his hand, he held a beast weapon whip by his side. You have caused so much trouble. Momo said, I don't know how you can activate the beast weapon so well, and your surprise attacks seem to work, but you will always be a weak level 1. Before Quinn could even get up, he was already surrounded by the other 6 second-year students. Vordan, watching the whole thing from the board, felt useless. I have to help him. He's only getting hurt because of me. This is all my fault, Vordan said. If you want to help him, then let me take over. A voice said in Vordan's head. Inside the assembly hall, there was one boy who was unsure of what to do, and that was Peter. He had been there the whole time from the very beginning, but chose to hide in the crowd so he wouldn't get picked. When he saw Quinn come to the stage to try help Vordan, he felt even more guilty. Why? Because the whole reason Vordan was tied up on the slab in the first place was because of him. The other day, when the second years came to see Peter, they had come with a proposal. Help them get Vordan to come to the assembly hall, and he would be protected by the second years. Of course, Peter felt like he had no choice. If he refused the second years there and then, they would have tortured him until he agreed anyway. So what was the use of fighting back if the end result was the same? After their combat classes had finished, Peter had asked Vordan to go with him to the assembly hall to help him further practice. When they entered the room, the second-year students, included Momo, were hiding waiting for him. When the time was right, they all came out at once and jumped him. But what had surprised Peter was in that instant, Vordan had turned and pushed Peter out of the way. Run. I'm sorry, this is all my fault, Vordan said. Vordan thought the second years had targeted him because of what he had been doing in his free time. He had been fighting the second-year students when they were all on their own, trying to weaken Momo's gang one by one. Not knowing what to do, Peter ran out of the room, only later to return with everyone else. Then when he saw Quinn, someone who was just as weak as him, stand up to the second years, Peter felt a pain in his heart so strong. He had betrayed them. But Peter was going to make things right. While no one was looking and everyone's attention was focused on the fights around them, Peter had managed to leave the assembly hall. Meanwhile, at the center of the assembly hall, Aaron and Layla were busy confronting the 2 level 4 students. The first years had spread out, making sure not to get hurt in the crossfire, but at the same time doing nothing to help. It was unclear who the winner would be, and they felt like if they joined the wrong side, it would only make things worse for them. Hey, do you mind if we switch? One of the second-year students said, My water abilities are weak against her. I see, so you want the level 2 user, huh? The other student replied, Oh well, just finish her off quickly. With that, the 2 second years charged in for the attack. The water ability user went after Layla, while the earth user went after Aaron. As the earth user got closer, he stomped the ground, and a spiked earth mound followed, heading right for Aaron. But Aaron remained calm. As the spike came towards her, she slashed her sword, and with a single strike, cut the spike in half, causing it to fall to the ground. What the? That beast weapon, if it cut through my earth ability, is it an advanced tier beast weapon? The earth user thought. However, he didn't have much time to think. With her other hand, Aaron had formed an ice spear and threw it towards her opponent. The earth user lifted his arms, causing a wall of earth blocking the attack. He then moved his hands apart, and at the same time the wall he had created split in two, but when the view in front of him was clear, Aaron was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, he felt his legs start to feel cold. When he looked down, he noticed they were starting to freeze. For a second-year level 4 Earth user, you are incredibly weak. Before the boy could react, Aaron had whacked him in the back of the head with the hilt of her sword. Then as he fell to the ground, she froze his arms and limbs in place, making sure he would stay on the ground. How did she win so easy? The first-year students watching said, Yeah, shouldn't a match between a level 4 and 5 user be closer than that? And he was a second-year student. Maybe they aren't as strong as we thought. Usually, a fight with a level 4 and 5 users would be a lot closer, especially considering the other student was a second year. But there was a major difference between the two fighters, and that was something called fighting IQ. No matter how strong someone's ability was or how powerful a punch they packed, you needed to know how to use your abilities and win. This could be improved with experience, or some people were just naturally gifted. For Aaron, She had always fallen into the gifted category. Although Erin had finished her match quickly, the same couldn't be said for Layla. Her attacks were basically useless. As an archer, her skills were best used when surprising her opponent and when there was a distance between the two. Here she had neither of them. Every attack of hers was met with a wall of water that would stop her arrows in their tracks, and finally when she was tired. The second-year student threw out his fist, and a ball of water came out towards her. It hit her dead in the stomach and sent her flying back towards the front of the hall near Vorden. The water user started running after her, planning to finish her. Layla, seeing this, struggled but was too hurt to get up. "Hey you, free me. I can deal with him." "What?" Layla said as she looked up, noticing that it was Vorden who was speaking to her. "Come on, hurry. We don't have much time. Touch my leg." Layla hesitated for a moment. She still had remembered what had happened when the two of them were in the room. She still had an odd feeling in her gut telling her Vorden was a bad person, but right now, it was the only person she could rely on. She crawled over to Vorden's side and touched his leg as he had asked. Then the shackles tied around Vorden's arms and legs started shaking. "Come on, help me, you bitch." Vorden shouted at her. Vorden was using Layla's telekinesis ability, but it was weak. It wasn't strong enough to break from the shackles. Layla then lifted her hand, and with the two of them working together, the shackles were finally removed and Vorden was free. He started to rotate his wrist as if he was getting used to his body. He shook his limbs out and started to jump up and down. "Finally, I get to come out. It's been a long time." As the water user continued to run forward now that Vorden was free, he was more cautious. The last time they had fought with him in the assembly hall, they remembered Vorden having earth powers. At the time, the last person he had touched was Peter. Vorden then started to laugh hysterically and charged towards the water user. It was an unexpected move. The water user panicked and threw out 2 lines of water blades. These were just as sharp as an attack from a regular blade, but could be thrown out. As the blades came towards him, at the last second Vorden managed to twist his body in an odd way, avoiding both of the blades. He then lifted one of the black balls from the ground using his telekinesis and threw it out. However, the attack was easy for the water user to block, forming a water wall stopping the ball, but then asterisk crack. Something was felt on the back of his leg, and at the same time a crunching sound was heard. The boy immediately fell to one knee. As he looked at Vorden in front of him, he could only see Vorden with his hands held out. Then another striking pain was felt through his body, this time on his other ankle. Without realizing it, Vorden had attacked him from behind, pulling the other black balls towards him. The water user was too focused on the attack in front, he never thought about an attack from behind. Also, it had come as a surprise to him that Vorden was not an earth user as he thought. Vorden then lifted up 2 more black balls and swung his hands down. At the same time, the balls came rushing down at a crazy speed, hitting the student in the forearms, breaking them at the same time. The student screamed in pain, and with his arms mangled, he could no longer use his water ability as he could before. Finally, Ratton have returned. The second-year students had Quinn completely surrounded. As he took a step forward to try to break out of the encirclement, a wind strike came towards him. He managed to lift his hand to block the attack, but at the same, another slash was felled against his back. 12/20 HP. The attacks continued with a mixture of abilities, but most of them were weak elemental abilities, such as level 2 wind users and earth users. However, when he was being attacked from all sides, the attacks quickly added up. Quinn continued to block strikes coming from the front of him, but still was hit from all sides. 11/20 HP. 10/20 HP, 9/20 HP. There was a constant cycle. Once he was injured to a certain degree, Quinn's blood bank would auto-activate and heal him, but even with the blood bank, there was no getting out of this one. But he knew this would happen to some degree. He never expected a win in the first place. Ignoring the pain of the strikes, and instead of trying to avoid all the attacks, he rushed forward towards one of the students. This time, 2 hits had hit him from each side, casing 2 big slashes on his body. 8/20 HP, 7/20 HP. But he didn't care. His speed was quick, and using the strength in his legs, he was able to move himself forward and grabbed one of the second-year students. He quickly went behind the student, grabbing his arm, and at the same time kept one of his claws towards the student's neck, using him as a meat shield. The second years were hesitant to attack, afraid they might hit their fellow classmate. Quinn continued to walk backwards with the student until his back was up against the wall. "Me and you both know you're not going to hurt him, Quinn," Momo said. "If you attack too deep and kill him, you'll be in trouble. Attack to shallow, and we will pounce on you and make you wish you were dead." Quinn hated to admit it, but Momo was right. He couldn't kill the student, and at the same time the second he turned his back to them, they would take him out. So Quinn was left with only one thing. He no longer had his claw hand out, but then started to choke the student from behind, wrapping his arm around his neck. He used his strength and carried on until he eventually passed out. 50 EXP gained. 275 out of 400 EXP. "No point wasting good EXP," Quinn said. As soon as the student fell to the ground, the attacks came out fast and furious from the others. Quinn was able to block most of them. Now his back was up against the wall. He started dodging a lot of the strikes, which made him think back to the test center. The situation he was in was similar to the agility test, where holographic spikes came at him. However, these attacks were more powerful and were greater in number. Eventually, Quinn let strike get in. 6/20 HP. Suddenly the attacks had stopped, and Momo had stood forward with his whip in his hand. Seeing the whip, Quinn remembered that a single attack last time had brought his HP down by 7 points. If he was to receive another attack from it right now, he would be brought down to below 0. Quinn still didn't know what happened when his HP would reach 0, but at the same time, this wasn't the time to find out. He had no choice. He would have to use the blood bank to heal himself. Even if the others did see him use this, it wouldn't reveal he was a vampire, but they would just think it was some type of self-healing ability. The problem was Quinn had already displayed abnormal strength. If he then displayed abnormal healing, things wouldn't add up. A student couldn't have two abilities apart from rare cases, which meant it would only lead to Quinn being asked more questions. Just as Quinn was deciding what to do, Momo sensed something and moved his head at the last second. As he did, a black ball came flying through the air and went past his head. Then the black ball stopped midair and suddenly started moving back towards Momo. Momo lashed his whip at the ball, slicing it in half. As he turned around, he saw Vorden standing there. When he looked to see what had happened to the rest of the second years, he could see a few had already been taken down, and those who hadn't been were busy engaging in combat with Layla and Aaron. "So you got free, huh?" Momo said. "Do you not remember what happened to you last time the two of us fought?" Momo taunted. "Last time you fought against that weakling. This time you're fighting me." Rattan said. "I'm not as nice as Vorden." Rattan lifted both hands, and with it, 2 more black balls of the ground lifted up. Vorden swung his hands in the air, and the black balls followed the same path. There was no need for Vorden to use his hands when using his telekinesis ability, but it allowed him to focus his mind better. Doing this moved the balls at greater speed and precision. After all, he wouldn't be able to use it as well as Layla, who had the ability most of her life. The balls flowed a similar pattern to his hands, striking at different directions. However, Momo would simply step forward, move back, or turn his body, slightly avoiding each of the balls. He then grew tired and grabbed one of the balls midair that was heading straight for his face. "Looks like you really don't remember what happened last time." Momo clenched his fist, tightly destroying the black ball held in his hands. He then swung his whip, destroying the other, without even looking where it was. Quinn wanted to help. While Momo's back was turned, he tried to go in for a strike, but before he even took a step, the whip came flying out and landed just in front of him. "Don't even think about it," Momo said. Before Quinn had taken a single step, Momo had already acted. Then Quinn waited once again for the right moment, and when he thought it was right, he tried moving in again, but the same thing had happened. Momo swung at his whip before Quinn had moved. "It can't be," Quinn thought. So far, Momo hadn't displayed anything reviling his ability, but just now, and how he had acted before, it seemed like it was part of his ability. There were 2 guesses Quinn had. He either had some type of mind-reading ability or future-seeing ability. If that was the case, then the fight ahead would be a tough battle. Quinn's guess about Momo was nearly spot on. Momo could see 2 seconds ahead into the future, although it wasn't as clear as others might think. His ability was activated through his eyes. When he turned on his ability, a new type of vision would appear. Everywhere Momo looked, there was an outline of what a person or object was going to do next. When Momo's back was turned and the black ball had come towards him, he could slightly feel the outline of the ball touching him, allowing him to move his head just in time. Just 2 seconds before Quinn has even begun moving towards Momo, his outline had already shown where and what Quinn was planning to do. It was a strong ability that took years for Momo to get a hang of at first. Just because one could see the future didn't help out in any other aspects. Momo's strength, speed, and reaction time all had to be trained with his ability. Even though Momo's ability was a rare one that was available on the marketplace, not many people opted for it for these reasons. But Quinn wasn't the only one who had figured out Momo's ability. Ratton had as well. "Who cares if you know what I'm going to do?" Ratton shouted. "All I need to do is do something you can't block." Ratton then started running towards him. Momo swung his whip, while Ratton held out his hand, slowing the whip down with his telekinesis ability. The whip slowed down enough, allowing him to jump over the strike. Then, with his other hand, something started to form. It looked like water was starting to surround his hand. With another swing, a water blade followed. Momo quickly moved to the side, avoiding one strike. But what quickly followed was a barrage of water strikes. Then at the same time from behind, another 2 black balls had been lifted and were coming right at him. Momo could see the black balls coming at him, and he knew he could do nothing but take a hit. He opted to avoid the water strikes, the more powerful of the attacks, and moved so the balls would hit his back. After being hit with the black balls, Momo moved away from Vorden, creating distance between the two. "I have to admit, I didn't expect you to be able to use 2 abilities. You didn't do something like this last time. It looks like you were hiding a trump card after all," Momo said, "but you weren't the only one holding back last time." While in his right hand, he held a whip. Something started to form in his left hand. At first, it looked just like a bunch of light particles forming something, but then eventually another whip appeared. Only this felt and looked different, as if it was alive almost. Just from holding it alone, the whip would continuously move like a snake. "Let me show you the difference between the second years and first years," Momo said. Even though Erin was currently busy fighting the other second-year students, she couldn't help but sense the power in the room. "So he has one. After all, huh? A soul weapon." While the distance between Momo and the others were far away, Layla had managed to make a break and get away from the other second-year students. Honestly, Erin was doing fine dealing with him on her own, and she wasn't much help in the first place. She quickly went to Quinn's side and could see he was badly injured. It wasn't so much that he couldn't move, but enough to say he was out of the fight for now at least. "Do you need some blood?" Layla whispered. "No, I'm fine. I'm not in any danger, don't worry about that. I just don't want to reveal anything in front of all these people." "Understand," Layla said as she then looked at Vorden. "Your friend, I hate to admit it, but he's strong." "Yeah." After looking at Vorden now and seeing how he fought so skillfully, as if he had done it 100 times before, and he was even using 2 abilities effortlessly, Quinn quickly realized there wasn't much he knew about Vorden, and that he probably had his very own secrets that he was hiding from everyone similar to himself. But again, instead of escaping when he was freed and running away, he had decided to come help. Although Quinn wasn't strong enough to help now, in the future he would repay back this kindness. Now with Momo's soul weapon, the confidence in him grew. He swung his soul whip, and it started to move at lightning speed. In response, Ratton created a wall of water with one hand and started to slow down the whip with the other, but the telekinesis ability was useless and didn't seem to do anything to slow the whip down. Then when the whip had reached the wall of water, it suddenly grew in length and had wrapped around Ratton's arm. Momo pulled forward, dragging Ratton to the ground, and then swung out his other whip, lashing against his back. Ratton tried rolling to avoid the lashes, but it seemed like the whip was following him, predicting where he would roll to next. Ratton had been lashed several times, and now his back was covered in blood. Then, with Ratton's other hand, he formed a small water blade. He knew that the whip would be too strong to cut, so instead he went for his own hand, complexly cutting it off from his own body. The whip was no longer attached to his body, and at the same time, so was his hand. Although unlike one would expect for blood to be drawn everywhere, Ratton was using an absurd amount of energy concentrating to stop his blood from spewing out from the wound with the telekinesis ability. And he honestly didn't know how much longer he could keep it up. "Damn you," Ratton shouted. "If only this body wasn't so hurt from before. Now you have gone and done it. You think a soul weapon is strong enough to defeat us? Well, think again. Little one, it's your turn. It's time to give this man hell." Just then, though, the doors to the assembly hall were swung wide open, and in came a tall, silver-haired female, and standing behind her was Peter. "I command everyone to halt this instant," she said. "If anyone does not obey this command, prepare to be punished." The woman standing next to Peter had long silver hair that went down to her waist. On her head, she was wearing a beret, and by her side was her trusty rapier sword that was jagged and looked to be made from a long beast bone. She had a feeling that resonated off her body. She looked like the older sister type who you were able to trust to get you out of trouble when you needed it. As soon as she had entered the room, at that moment everyone froze, all except for one student. A second year who was too heated in the moment. He had finally seen Erin drop her guard. He continued to charge forward and was ready to attack, but before even a second could pass, the female teacher who had entered the room was right by the student's side, and a few moments later, he had collapsed on the floor with the back of his foot all bloody. "When did she get over there? Hey, look at his ankles. Do you think she did that?" As Momo looked at who had entered the room, he immediately put his soul weapon away. Momo knew a lot of the teachers and high-position people in the academy. After all, he had already been here a year, and the person who had entered the room was not to be messed with. When she said whoever didn't listen to her would be punished, she meant it. The female's name was Faye Dallum. She was a sergeant at the academy and was mostly in charge of squad training. Anyone else but her, Momo said. Not only that, but her ability was super speed. The worst matchup for Momo, no matter how far ahead he could see in the future, her speed was just a fast to react. Not that he had planned to go against her anyway. He had already made that mistake last year when Faye was still only a private at the academy. Those of you who are injured go to the doctor's office to be treated immediately, while the rest of you head to the dorms and stay inside until you're called out again. Do you understand? Faye said. Most of the first-year students were silenced. They had no clue who she was or what was happening right now. Then from the lack of people answering her with a reply, Faye drew her rapier once more, and after seeing this, the students immediately answered, "Yes, Mississippi." Vorden had gone to the hospital, carrying his arm in his hand. The second-year students went to their own separate part of the building that was located somewhere else to get treated, while out of the first-year students, no one was really hurt apart from Vorden and Quinn. This time, Quinn had no choice but to head to the doctor's office. His clothes were all bloody, and he had lost a lot of blood, but once he had been out of combat for more than 10 minutes, his body started to heal itself. After successfully attaching Vorden's arm back to his body, Haley, the school doctor, had gone up to check on Quinn. When she asked him to take off his shirt so she could directly heal his wounds, she noticed that the markings had mostly already healed. "What is this? For this much blood, the wound should be a lot bigger." Quinn started to laugh nervously. "Yeah, my friend has a healing ability and managed to heal me a bit before I got here." "Oh, another healer," Haley said, surprised. "Well, if you get the chance, send them down here. Their ability is quite good, and it looks like they have done a splendid job. I could do with help, and I would love to have a student of my own." "Sure," Quinn replied. Haley then proceeded to complete healing the rest of Quinn's wounds on his body. After she was done, there was not a mark on him. During Quinn's own healing process, his body had used up quite a bit of energy, and once again the message had appeared stating he was hungry. Blood bank 90 out of 100. After consuming some blood from his blood bank, he no longer felt hungry and didn't have to worry about going on a frenzy for at least another 2 days. Once Quinn and Vorden had arrived back in their rooms, they were told not to leave until they were notified. Once in a while, a private would call out a student's name, and they would be taken somewhere for questioning. Inside their own rooms was Vorden, Peter, and Quinn. "Thanks for calling the sergeant when you did. Otherwise, me and Quinn would have been goners by now." "No problem," Peter replied, still feeling bad by the whole thing. Although he had done the right thing by getting Faye, he still felt bad for having tricked Vorden into going to the hall in the first place. "What do you think will happen to the second years?" Quinn asked. I'm not too sure," Vorden replied. "If this was a one-on-one incident, then I'm pretty sure they would have ignored it. But this time there were several students involved. Most likely they will look for one person to pin the blame on." Meanwhile, inside one of the integration rooms, a large muscular man with forearms the size of thighs was sitting opposite the second-year student Momo, and on his shoulder, the man had the rank of general. His name was Duke King, and he was head of the second-year students. "Of all the people, it had to be Faye to stop us," Momo complained. "I did as you asked, and now I might pay for it." "Will you relax? Nothing will come of this, I promise you that." Duke replied, "You're only students, and these types of things happen, and I will vouch for you." "Really? So this one all fall back on me then?" Momo asked. Then Duke stood up and went up behind Momo and whispered in his ear. "Of course, as long as no one finds out about our little secret," Duke said with a smile. All the students involved in the incident had been interviewed, and that, of course, included Quinn and Vorden. However, they weren't asked many questions like the two of them thought they would be. They were simply asked to recall the events that happened. Judging by the fact that the person integrating them didn't seem surprised by what they had said, it seemed like they had already gathered everything they needed from the other students and was just doing this as a formality. The next day had arrived, and it was a weekend for students. Just like any other school, students did not have to attend classes and were free to do as they wished around the city. Although the curfew still exited, so they had to be back in their dorm rooms before 10 in the evening, and they were not allowed to leave the city. However, for the leaders at the school, their day was not as relaxing as the students, for a meeting had been called. Inside the academy on the top floor, the leaders of the academy had gathered in a fairly large meeting hall. A large table was centered in the middle of the room. The table was split into two different sections. At the head of the table, there were 4 seats in total. One of the seats was a little bigger than the others, and this was where the captain of the academy would sit. Currently, this seat remained empty for the meeting. In the other seats, usually by the captain's side, were the 3 generals of the school. There was the head of the second-year students, Duke, with his large arms and muscular build. Then the head of the first-year students, Nathan, who looked the complete opposite of Duke. He was small in size and wore glasses. He was always casually dressed for important occasion, which annoyed Duke. The two of them did not get along. Lastly, there was the third general, who was head of staff, and the rest of the privates and teachers in the academy. Currently, his seat was also empty. The 2 generals sat in their seats waiting for the others to arrive, and, as usual, there was silence between the two of them. Then finally the doors opened, and 8 people had arrived, all wearing the military uniform, and each one of them had the rank of sergeant displayed. Out of these 8 sergeants, it included Leo, the beast weapons teacher, Faye, the head of squads, and Haley, the school doctor. The 8 sergeants sat in their seats opposite to the generals, and finally it was time for the meeting to start. Faye was the first to stand and speak. "We are here today to conduct the meeting on what to do with the second-year students who were involved in the case involving primarily the first-year student known as Vorden Blade and the students who were part of Dell's class and Leo's beast weapons class." Faye then pressed a little button on a controller she held in her hand. In front of the generals and the other sergeants, a holographic report was being displayed to them. I believe you have all read the reports, but this is here just for your reference. I would like to ask your opinion on how these students should be punished. General Duke. Punished? Duke said, "I see no reason for these students to be punished. If you look at the report, it seems like Vorden was the first to attack the others. They were simply retaliating. These types of things happen all the time." "But then why gather the rest of the first-year students?" Nathan casually added, "It seems like to me other students had gotten involved. I agree the students fight all time, and we purposely do nothing to stop this, but this seemed a little too much, no?" "Fine. Further restrictions will be put on the second years and first-year students. They shall only meet when necessary. I will be in charge of issuing out the punishments to the second-year students. Is that okay with you, Nathan?" Nathan simply shrugged, as if he didn't really care about the matter in the first place. He had only made his argument to annoy Duke. "I urge the rest of the sergeant to take extra precaution," said Faye. "It was only recently we had the death of a student in our school. Unlike with Brandon, Vorden is an original. If his family was to get involved in it, would not be good for the academy. Tisich, filthy scum, Duke said under his breath. The military didn't have a good impression of originals. When the war started, they were the ones who risked their lives to save the people of the planet. It wasn't until it truly looked like the humans would lose the war did the originals come forward and share their power with everybody, and not even all of them did that. Then Haley stood up. I would like to talk about the matter involving the two students with strange wounds on their bodies. Were there any reports about a beast escaping from one of the portals? Your father, who is not present at the moment, reported that there was no such thing. Even using the radar, we were unable to trace anything. Duke replied, if it wasn't the beasts, then just what caused those wounds? Haley thought as she sat back down in her seat. How was the preparation for the portal outing coming along for the first-year students? Leo asked. Yes, everything has been all set up, Nathan said. A green portal has been selected for the students to go through, and the base has made preparations for their arrival. It should all go smoothly next week. Do you know what planet the expedition will take place on? Leo asked. Then I will be able to better prepare my students. It's best to ask your students to pack some sun cream and their sunglasses, as they will be arriving on the planet Kaladi, Nathan replied. Planet Kaladi, a planet that was mostly covered in desert and contained low-tier beasts. Its day cycles were also vastly different compared to that of Earth. Instead of the 24-hour day and night cycle that Earth had, Kaladi contained a 72-hour cycle. It was brilliant for those that loved the sunlight and heat. After the incident with second years, Quinn realized that although he had gained a lot of strength compared to what he was before, there were still others that he wasn't strong enough to fight against. Although Momo was strong in the group of second years, he was nowhere near the top of the food chain. There were many higher levels and even originals whose powers couldn't be measured. And even out of the first-year students, there were those that were powerful, that included his good friend Vorden and Aaron. If Quinn wished to get on their level, he would have to get stronger. The easiest way for him to get stronger was by consuming as many different types of blood as he could possible, but there was a major problem. After the death of Brandon and the second-year incident, security around the academy had been tighter than ever. More soldiers were put on patrol, and it seemed like they were keeping an eye on everyone. For now, while tensions were high in the academy, it was best that he laid low. So that left him with another option to improve his fighting skills. Quinn still hadn't learned the two skills yet, but just learning them wasn't going to be enough. After watching Vorden, he realized he needed to also learn how to use them, so he needed experience. Hey, I'm going to head into town to grab some supplies. Do you want to come with? Vorden asked. Quinn hesitated for a while. Originally, he had planned to meet up with Layla to practice the hammer strike, but at the same time, he hadn't been able to relax in a while. In his last school, Quinn had never made any friends and was the lonesome type, but now was his opportunity to go out and have some fun. One day wouldn't hurt, right? Yeah, sure, I'll come along, Quinn replied. What about you, Peter? Vorden asked. Peter had been avoiding the two of them for a while, but since they were roommates, it was almost impossible. He still felt bad about the whole situation, but he had finally made up his mind. He never wanted to do anything like that again. Yeah, I'll come as well. The three of them then proceeded to head into town. They went ahead and grabbed some food, watched a movie, and had a good laugh, but as they were outside, Peter spotted a group of high-level first years he had met before. They were the same people who Peter had hung out with at the canteen. As Peter had made eye contact with the group, they had signaled to him they wanted to talk. Hey guys, I just remembered that I promised to meet up with a few people from school tonight, said Peter. It was great hanging out with you guys, but I'll see you when you get back to the dorm. Vorden looked at Quinn, realizing that they both, though Peter's words sounded suspicious. Hey Peter, you know if something is up, tell me I will help you out, Vorden said. No, it's nothing, I promise. I really did make some good friends. I have to rush off now. Bye you guys, Peter said as he took off out of sight of the other two. No matter what, Peter didn't want an incident like last time to happen. He would deal with the problems himself. Vorden was strong, but from the fight last time, clearly Vorden wasn't strong enough to handle the upper years, and Peter knew they were the ones behind everything. Peter finally turned a corner into an alleyway where 5 first-year students were patiently waiting. Took you long enough. The student standing in front of the group had a scar on his chin, and his name was Earl. He was the leader of the first-year group who was directly under Momo's gang. Then suddenly Earl went and grabbed Peter, throwing him up against the wall. "What the hell do you think you were doing, calling the teacher the other day?" Earl said, "Now Momo and the others are giving us a hard time for relying on you." He then punched Peter in the stomach, causing him to kneel over and fall to the ground. "Why should we be the ones to be punished? This is all your fault." Earl ran up and kicked Peter once again in the stomach. The kick was hard and Peter's body was starting to shake. He felt like any second now he was going to throw up the ice cream he had just eaten with the other two. Earl walked over to Peter and bent down to grab his hand. He held one of Peter's fingers and snapped it back hard and fast at the same time a scream was heard. "What the hell? Gag this wimp, will you?" One of the students then ripped a part of his shirt and shoved it into Peter's mouth. "Now we have another job for you, Peter, and you better do it right this time. You understand? Just nod if you agree." Peter then shook his head. He had already decided that no matter what he would never betray Vorden or Quinn again. "What, are you saying no?" Peter then nodded, giving his answer to Earl. The vein on the side of Earl's head was now popping out as the anger inside him grew. A lowly first-year student dared to go against him, and he, a level 4 student, had to work under someone else. This wasn't the life he was expecting to have at the academy, and he needed to take out his anger somehow. Earl then immediately grabbed Peter's fingers and started to snap them one by one. Each time he would break a finger, he would ask Peter if he was willing to help them, but each time Peter shook his head. In the end, all 5 of Peter's fingers had broken, and Peter still hadn't agreed to their request. "Hey, Jerry, get over here," Earl shouted. One of the first-year students, standing behind Jerry, came over and knelt down. "Do your thing, Jerry." Then Jerry placed his hand on top of Peter's, and slowly a warm feeling was felt, and the bones in Peter's fingers were starting to take shape. They reformed to what they once were, and he had been healed. Then a big smile on Earl's face could be seen. He grabbed Peter's fingers again and repeated the process again and again. Eventually, after an hour had passed of breaking, hurting, and re-healing Peter, Peter's mind had given in. Without him realizing it, he no longer wanted to feel the pain and nodded, agreeing to their request. "Good, see, now if you had done that in the first place, we wouldn't have had to go through all that." Earl said, "Now this time, you better do it right and be sure not to involve anyone." With Peter gone, that left Quinn and Vorden on their own. They were currently walking down the high street, which was full of closed shops and restaurants. Students only received 10 credits a day as an allowance, but that didn't stop their parents from sending them extra money while they were in school. The richer students were free to spend and buy whatever they liked, and sadly the richer students were usually the stronger ones as well. Although the city didn't open up to any regular civilians, it was still open up to all the workers. The city was full of military personnel, but not all of them were soldiers. There were still cooks that were needed, admin staff, engineers, building workers, and even general people who would run the shop. They had all been granted special access from the military, and in return were given nice living accommodations and didn't have to worry about life on the outside world. So although they worked for the military, they weren't required to be relied on for fighting unless absolutely necessary. While the two were walking, Quinn couldn't help but think back to the fight between Vorden and Momo. "Hey, Vorden, I know you said your ability resets every day, but you never said you could wield 2 abilities at once." Quinn asked. "Didn't I?" Vorden said with an awkward smile. "Well, there's some of my family that can even hold 3. "Really? So how does it exactly work?" "Well, if I told you our family secrets, Quinn, you would have to become a part of our family. Either that, or I'd have to kill you." For a second, there was an awkward silence between the two, as Quinn wasn't sure if Vorden was joking or not. "Relax, will you?" Vorden said, "But yeah, I honestly can't tell you anything. You know, originals rules and all." Vorden belonged to one of the original families that had decided to keep their ability within their family, meaning the only people that knew how to copy other abilities were the Blades. Of course, Vorden wasn't allowed to talk to anyone about their ability. "Yeah, sorry about that, but if you don't mind me asking, if you copy an ability you've never received before, how are you able to fight with them so well?" "Let me show you something," Vorden said. The two of them continued to walk down the high street, which was filled with shops, until Vorden eventually stopped just outside a game store. The two of them headed inside, and there were all types of games filled on the shelves. At the very back of the shop was a VR pod for people to test out before they bought anything. Just like everything else, even the gaming technology had improved significantly after the war. Then Vorden pointed at the VR capsule. "You see that thing? I grew up playing on that." "What?" Quinn thought, but then Quinn remembered Leo mentioning something about a VR game that was popular between students. He said if he wanted to get fighting experience, it would be good if he played a certain game. Is this what he was talking about? There's a popular game played in the outside world and within the military schools called Power Fighter. The game is simple. It gives you an open empty room, and the two of you fight until one loses. Although it sounds simple, the game itself is used to help people train. The VR capsule can record all attributes of your body. Anything you do in the real world, you can do in the game. The only thing that it can't do is record your ability. Vorden then walked up to the capsule and touched the front of the capsule where there was a round ring. A holographic display appeared with the game settings on the top. Vorden then placed his hand on the holographic display, and a notification sound was heard. "Welcome user, ID VB copy," the machine said. As Vorden logged into the game, his user ID's information could be seen along with a dummy model of his fighter, which looked nothing like Vorden. It displayed the total amount of fights Vorden had, and how many wins and losses. Although Vorden quickly went to that screen onto another, too quick for Quinn to see anything. Then Vorden was suddenly on an ability tab. The list seemed almost endless. "Wait, I thought you said the game couldn't record your ability?" Quinn asked. "It can't, but so the game was even more realistic, and so it could be used as a training tool. It uploads into its database every ability that is shared out there in the world that we know today. Of course, only the ones that are made public. So original abilities and abilities that have yet to be discovered aren't on this list, including my own. However, I can select any ability I want. Even if I can't perform it in the real world, I can practice with it in the game." Quinn finally understood how Vorden was able to become well-adverse with multiple different abilities. This was something that would only greatly benefit someone like him who was able to use whatever ability he wished. Most people who were playing the game would want to get stronger and better at using their abilities. That meant they would usually only select their own ability. What was the point of selecting something that you could never use in the real world, unless you just wanted to have the experience? The game is actually very popular with the other military schools. Vorden continued to explain. So much so that the military has designed its own servers, so it only connects to other schools, but you can also just play with the outside world as well. Before you enter the game, you can even input your power level. This way it will match you with those people around the same level. People can lie about their level, but those type of people will never get better at fighting, bullying those weaker than them all the time. Quinn then walked up to the capsule and started to inspect it. It sounded amazing and was exactly what Quinn needed. This way, he was able to practice against other students without others realizing it was him. Then when Quinn lifted up the tag on it, there were more zeros on the thing than he had ever seen before. There was no way he could afford such a thing. Maybe some of the other students who could be sent credits from their family, but not Quinn. Vorden started to laugh. "Don't worry about it. You don't need to buy one yourself. The academy has a room full of them." "Really? Come on, let's head back and give it a go." The sun was starting to set outside, so it was just the right time for Vorden and Quinn to head back to the academy, and when they did, they immediately went over to the VR room. Just like the capsule in the shop, it was a room filled with rows and rows containing capsules, and off to the side was a small shop and counter where students were able to buy snacks and refreshments. The room was currently packed with students. Just as Vorden and Leo had said, the game was incredibly popular. Looking at the excitement in the students' eyes and faces, Quinn started to feel upset. It felt like there was a world he never got to experience growing up just because he was poor. The two of them went up to the front counter that was stationed next to the small cafe. "Hi, we would like to rent out 2 capsules, please," Vorden asked. "A single capsule will cost you 10 credits per hour," the female replied. Hearing that number made Quinn gulp. For some reason, he had expected the capsules to be free, but of course, they would have to pay to rent them. With Quinn's 10 credits, he received a day. At most, he could play the game for was an hour a day. He didn't need the money for anything else. After all, the school provided the accommodation and 3 meals a day for them. "All right, are you ready?" Vorden asked. "Oh, what did you pay?" "Yeah, don't worry about it. Come on, let's go. The woman behind the counter had handed Vorden 2 tags numbered 23 and 24. The two of them walked around the room until they had found 2 capsules next to each other. They both had large numbers displayed on the front of the capsule in big bold ink. Here we are, Vorden said. With these capsules, they're only able to link to the military servers. You can fight with others from other schools, but you won't be able to connect it to the normal servers. You will need to buy your own capsule for that. When you log into the game, you can play as a guest for now and just search for the ID VB copy and join my room when you can. With that, the two of them slowly climbed into the VR capsule. When the machine, since they were both comfortably inside, the capsule lid slowly started close in on the both of them. Then before they realized it, their minds were completely transported to another space. Quinn was now in a large, empty white room. There were no walls in sight, and it looked like the room was endless. Suddenly, a screen appeared in front of him. Welcome to Power Fighter. Would you like to? Log and register play as guest. As Vorden had suggested for now, Quinn decided to play as a guest. Then he went on through the system and started to search for Vorden's gamer ID. Once he had selected to join the person's room, he patiently waited for Vorden to accept. Room invite accepted, transporting in 3, 2. Then in an instant, Quinn had been transported to another empty white space room. Only this time Vorden was there as well, but Vorden didn't look like himself. He looked like a completely different person. Both his hands had been wrapped in bandages, and on his face, he wore a scarf. He looked like an ancient ninja. Vorden, is that you? Oh, sorry, Vorden said, and the next second he looked like the ordinary Vorden at school. What was that? Quinn asked. That. The game allows you to customize your character, so you can make it look like whatever you want. The clothes I was wearing was skin, although they cost credits, so I wouldn't worry about that. The sound of the game was just getting even better for Quinn. Allowing the users to create a character to be used in the game meant that no one would know it was him, unless they knew his username. Do you want to watch me play a few games, so you know how the game works? Vorden asked. Sure. Vorden then created a party, where Quinn was able to spectate. Suddenly, in the white space, 4 stands appeared, forming an arena-like shape, and Quinn was teleported to the seating area in one of the stands. The game tried its best, even for spectators, to make it feel like the real thing. Once Quinn was comfortably seated, Vorden went to search for a match. Vorden selected the power level of 2. This way, he would only be matched up with level 2s. There was also a quick match option, where it would match you with anyone who had selected the same option regardless of power level. The ability he currently had his character set to was Earth. He chose this because Vorden himself had been trying to learn the Earth ability better, so that way when Peter got stronger with it, Vorden would be able to help him use it. When an opponent was found, he too was teleported into space where Vorden stood. The two of them started out on the opposite side of the room. Then Quinn could see a big countdown appear over the arena. When the countdown reached 0, the match immediately began. Vorden was going up against another Earth user. Earth users were the most common ability to be found. The match didn't last long, though, as it was clear that Vorden had the greater experience when it came to fighting. The match had only lasted a total of 5 minutes, but while watching the game, Quinn started to figure out how it worked. Above each player's head was a health bar, but there was no way to show how much health each player had. Judging by what Vorden had said, this was most likely because everyone had a different set of health depending on what the VR headset was able to read from the body. Quinn himself knew this because of his inspect skill. Every time he would look at the stats of a different person, some of them had different amount, and that included him. The next thing he noticed was the fact that there wasn't actually any damage done to the player. When Vorden would strike or stab the person, the system would cause the player to react to these, either starting the player, but it wouldn't permanently damage the person like it would have done in real life. Similar to a game, it would treat hits on vital parts as a critical hit, but the player could continue to fight like normal as long as their HP didn't hit 0. After that, Quinn continued to watch Vorden play a few more games, and before they knew it, their time was up. Although Quinn didn't have the time to play today, he couldn't wait to try out the machine tomorrow. It was getting late, and it was almost time for their curfew. So Quinn and Vorden decided it would be best to head back to the dorm rooms. When they arrived, they noticed that the lights were out and Peter was already in the room, fast asleep. Does he look okay? Quinn asked. as he noticed Vorden was looking around to see if he could see any markings on his face or body. Yeah, he seems fine, but even if he was getting bullied, he could have gone to the doctor's office before coming here, Vorden replied. Well, I still think we should keep an eye on him. There's no way higher levels would just become friends with a lower level for no reason, Quinn said. Vorden cleared his throat loudly and started to look at himself. Of course, there are some exceptions, Quinn said, smiling. With the other two now fast asleep, Quinn was still awake, messing around with his system. He was busy watching the tutorial videos of the hammer strike. He didn't have enough points in agility to learn the flash step, but with the gauntlets, he did have enough for the hammer strike. The video contained the blonde man demonstrating what to do step by step. It was incredibly detailed, showing everything in slow motion to the point where it also described the feeling the user should have every step of the way. Quinn repeatedly watched the video, as he wanted to learn and test it out in the game tomorrow. After finally remembering all the steps and believing he had a confident grasp on the skill, he shut his eyes and went to sleep. The next day, Quinn had woken up earlier than the other two. He immediately wanted to go to the game to create his character and test out the skill he had been learning all night. Just in case the others wondered where Quinn was, he left a note before leaving. When he finally arrived, the VR room was emptier than it was yesterday, most likely because it was early in the morning and not a lot of students had woken up yet. Quinn then went on to do the same as Vorden had done yesterday. He went up to the pretty lady who stood behind the counter and asked to rent a capsule, only this time for 2 hours. There wasn't much use for his credits other than buying late-night snacks, and at the moment, not even that satisfied him. Ever since he had his first taste of blood, food was starting to taste bland. He still got hungry like everyone else, but the taste of ice cream and sweets just didn't have the same rush effect it once had. To get that feeling again, he could only get it from blood. But Quinn made sure to only consume blood when he needed to or to get himself stronger. He was afraid that he might become addicted to the feeling, and if he did, it would only cause more problems for him. Before entering his capsule, Quinn looked around the room and noticed some students carrying their beast weapons with them. Not all students used one like Vorden, but after watching the games Vorden had played yesterday, he did see a few of his opponents have one, which meant most likely that the students bringing their weapons with them meant that the game was also able to recognize the power of beast weapons. Just on the side of the capsule, there was a large rectangular box, and underneath were the words written, Beast Weapons. So it looked like Quinn was right after all. After taking off his gauntlets and placing it into the box, the capsule started to scan the weapons. Scan complete. The beast weapon may now be used with the capsule. He then hopped in and logged into the game. Only this time, instead of logging in as a guest, he decided to register an account. Please create a user ID. Quinn thought long and hard. He didn't want anything that could give away his real identity away, but at the same time, he wanted a name that would express his newfound self. Something like Vampire God just wouldn't work and gave too much information. Plus, the idea of putting vampire in his name just sent cringe tinkles running down his spine. Finally, he had settled on name. User ID created Blood Evolver. The name was chosen for a few reasons. Quinn could feel his body getting stronger with each person's blood he drank. It was as if his body was evolving into something else, and in the future, he knew he would be stronger than he was now. He thought the name was very fitting for himself. The next step was to design his character. The body proportions of his character were the same as him, but he was able to choose what hairstyle and simple clothing he wanted on it. Quinn had always been born with black curly hair and wanted to change it, but never got the chance to. Now it felt like he could be someone else. After going through all the options, he finally decided on a red, spiky-haired character who wore simpler villager clothing. It looked like a farmer from an old fantasy world. Once the character had been completed, Quinn was once again teleported to the large, white, empty room. That's when Quinn noticed something. While in the room, Quinn was able to walk around freely and move his body just like he could outside. He was currently dressed as the character and even had his gauntlets on. Then when Quinn tried to open up his system, to his surprise, it appeared like usual, showing all of his current stats. Quinn looked down at his gauntlets and immediately wanted to test something out. Blood swipe. And in that instant, a red claw-like line left Quinn's hands and scratched the ground. For whatever reason, It seemed like Quinn's system and abilities still worked inside the game. After finding out that his blood swiped worked in the game, Quinn immediately opened up his system to check his stats again. Only unlike the outside world where his HP would have gone down by 1 HP, everything had still remained the same. Was it because using it didn't actually use any blood? When Quinn would use blood swipe outside, the red claw-like shape would leave his hand, and at the same time, he felt like a piece of energy inside him had left with it. The minus in his HP would indicate that it took part of his life force or his blood. But inside the game world, the attack did no such thing. It was just replicating what his mind told it to do, while scanning the body inside the capsule to see if it was possible. To test this, Quinn swiped his hands non-stop, swipe after swipe. Red lines left his fingertips in a flurry, but at the same time, no HP was lost. Just in case, Quinn opened up the game system and checked, and right next to his name, where there was a section to fill in your ability, there are the words written none in the box. However, another thought came to Quinn's mind. If he didn't lose any HP when using the skill, this also meant that his skill blood bank would have no effect in the game. When he would get attacked, it would do no physical harm to his real body on the outside. He wasn't actually losing health, so inside the game, he wouldn't be able to rely on his blood bank to save him out of tough situations. But the fact that Quinn was able to use these abilities in the game made him think. Was his system really an ability? At first, he assumed so. After all, he had received the power from what had looked like an ability book. Of course, he had never heard of an ability before like this, but there were many abilities in the world that originals had hidden and kept for themselves. Then he thought back to his status change. Next to race, it stated he was no longer human. Perhaps his abilities were more a side effect of changing race, rather than an ability itself. That's why the skills that he unlocked through the system didn't really follow a pattern. What the blood bank could do differed greatly due to what his blood swipe did. If Quinn's theory was right, did this mean he could also learn ability? He hadn't tried so far, because he thought it simply wouldn't have worked, but now if he was to test this, he needed to think long and hard about what ability to learn. Before going into his first game, Quinn wanted to test out the hammer strike. He had been watching the video all last night and felt like he was ready. Place your foot forward like this, and at the same time rotate your body. The energy should flow through your toes upwards. Then as you pull back your hand, stomp on the ground, and at the same time release the energy through your fist. Quinn mumbled as he went through the steps. At first, Quinn did all of the required steps slowly, making sure he did all of the steps perfectly, not using any of his energy or strength. He did everything step by step, as the video had explained. After going through it a few times, he was ready. In one motion, he did all the steps as fast as he could, and just like the video had stated, he could feel the energy rising from the bottom of his feet into his fist. The powerful strike left his hand, and a loud bang was heard. A small shockwave in the air was created. "I did it," Quinn said. Although the shockwave was nowhere near the size of the man in the video, Quinn was still happy with the result. There was no longer any need for him to delay anymore, and he went and clicked on the search function. For his first match, Quinn wanted to go against the same power level user as him, a level 1. Technically, Quinn himself knew he was beyond level 1. If he was to take a guess, he would say he was around the same power level as a 2.5, but for his first match, he just wanted to make sure of a few things. The game had found him an opponent, and he was immediately teleported to an arena. When the countdown had finished, it was time for the match to start. The student in front of him had no beast weapon, so Quinn was cautious at first, and at the same time, he wanted to test something out. Quinn got in close to the student and was ready for whatever was to come. That's when the student had shape-shifted his hands into a claw-like shape and scratched at Quinn's body. The attack was slow and Quinn was able to block, but chose not to and allowed the attack to scratch against his chest. While playing the game, inside the user's view was his and his opponent's HP bar, placed in the bottom right-hand corner. When the attack went through, a small amount of HP had been taken. Quinn then quickly stepped back a few steps and proceeded to use his blood bank skill. HP is currently full, unable to use blood bank. It was as he had suspected. Although he took damage in the game, nothing had happened to his real body outside. With his thought confirmed, Quinn was now ready to end the match. He dashed forward, and when he was close enough, he threw out a blood swipe. The student lifted his claws to block, but the second the blood swipe made impact, his claws had shattered, and followed up behind the first blood swipe was a second one. The student's HP was lowered now by around 25%. Although Quinn could have easily finished the match with a barrage of blood swipes now, he chose not to. He had wanted to originally play the game to help train his fighting skills. And in the outside world, Quinn wasn't able to use the blood swipes as he liked. Quinn got in closer to the student. By now, the student's claws had already regenerated. The student swung again, but this time Quinn ducked underneath the attack and threw out a punch to the student's stomach, followed by another punch to the student's face, and finished him off with a cross-shaped dual blood swipe with both hands. Winter Blood Evolver. Just then, though, Quinn had received another message from his own system. Opponent has been defeated. 25 EXP has been earned. 305 of 400 EXP. It was unexpected, but Quinn had received EXP for defeating an opponent in the game. Suddenly, a large grin appeared on his face. After defeating the student inside the game, Quinn received 25 EXP points compared to his regular 50. This was a large surprise to him, as Quinn didn't expect a fight in the game to contribute to points in his system, but at the same time, this was great news. Due to the heightened security around the school, it would be harder for him to find opponents and draw out their blood. In the gauntlets, he was using a dead giveaway. Although gauntlets were a rare weapon, there were millions of military personnels playing the game. Even if he was to use them, they wouldn't be able to pinpoint it to him. But now that Quinn was able to level up, it solved his current problem of getting stronger without the need of consuming blood. Although he didn't know why he had only received 25 EXP. If he had to take a guess, it could have been because he wasn't fighting these people in real life, or the fact that the opponent he went up against was too weak. Without wasting any more time, Quinn immediately went to search for another game. He set the power level to level 1, that way he would be matched up against easy opponents. An opponent was almost found instantly, and Quinn got straight to work. Rather than reserving his power like in the last game, Quinn decided this time he would just send out a barrage of blood swipes at his opponent. And his plan worked. His first opponent was dealt with so quickly that Quinn didn't even have time to find out what ability he had. 25 EXP gained. 330 of 400. Quinn's next 3 opponents were dealt with just as easy as the other 2. There was an Earth Elemental user who was too slow to cast his spells. He simply avoided the attacks, and then when was in range, would unleash the blood swipes. The 2 after that were just as easy as Quinn's previous fights. He would quickly dodge their attacks, and when he was close enough to them, he would spam his skill. Of course, Quinn knew he wouldn't be able to do this type of thing outside the game. After all, the skill had a major setback of reducing his health. If Quinn was ever in the danger zone and then got attacked, he would be dead in an instant. But he just wanted to level up as soon as possible, and after defeating the next 3, he did. 405 of 400 EXP. Congratulations, you are now level 4. Race, Halfling. HP 25 of 25. 5/800 EXP. Strength 13-3. Stamina 12. Agility 14. For the first time since Quinn had leveled up, he hadn't received a new ability. He somewhat had expected this, but at the same time was hoping for something useful. He would just have to keep leveling up and wait for more skills in the future. Finally, though, what Quinn had wanted had arrived. The reason why he wanted to level up so fast was because of the free stat point received after every level up. Agility 15. He immediately put the point into his agility stat, and now he could finally learn the flash step from the tutorial. This time, while following the tutorial from the blonde man, Quinn was able to follow him step by step along with the video. Unlike when learning the hammer strike, where he had to watch it repeatedly and was unable to do everything. After several minutes of Quinn practicing the flash step, he finally had a stroke of success. Yes, Quinn shouted. However, what Quinn did notice was while he was in the white room on his own, his body would never feel tired. He was able to perform the flash step as many times as he wanted without feeling tired. This did not apply to when he was in a match, though. Using the blood swipe did take up Quinn's stamina. He felt this affecting him after sending out attack after attack during a match. It meant the white room acted like some type of training room, where they were unaffected by their physical body's restraints. With the flash step learnt, Quinn finally wanted to experience a fight with a tougher opponent. Instead of searching by power level, Quinn decided to select quick match and would let fate decide the level of his opponent. In the real world, you wouldn't be able to choose who you went up against, so it was important for Quinn to have experience fighting in all sorts of situations. Then a few moments later, a match was found. This time when Quinn entered the arena floor, he could see his opponent standing opposite him. He was wearing a long red cape, and by his side were 2 daggers. Quinn also realized they weren't alone either. There was also a person sitting in the stands watching Quinn and his opponent. "Oh, don't worry about him," the caped man said. "He's just my senior. He's watching me fight, so he can give tips." Quinn then tried using his inspect skill on his opponent to see what power level or ability they had, but there was no luck. The inspect skill didn't seem to work in the game. But before the match began, Quinn made sure to open up his status screen and decided to leave it open and off to the side. During this match, he wanted to keep a close eye on it. When both of them were ready, the countdown started over their heads. 3, 2, 1, go. As soon as the sound dinged, indicating the start of the match, the caped man took out his daggers and swung them out fast. 2 wind blades followed. The attack was similar to Quinn's blood swipe, only the distance the attack could be used was far greater and faster. Quinn then decided to attack with his own blood swipe. The 2 lines of power clashed in the middle and canceled each other out. A red color. What ability is that? The caped man was wondering, and at the same time, the caped man senior was thinking the same thing. This time, Quinn charged forward. His abilities all required him to be used at close range. The caped man, seeing this, threw more wind strikes out, but Quinn just replied back with his own blood swipes, but this time sending out 4 of them. When the first 2 canceled out the wind strikes, the next 2 carried on moving forward. That's when the caped man lifted his cape and spun around. The blood strikes smacked into the cape, but there was no effect and not even a scratch left on the cape. Is that beast armor? And a high-level one at that, Quinn thought. The 2 of them were now in punching distance of one another. The capped man swung his daggers out fast. Quinn lifted his hands and managed to grab onto the daggers, allowing the blade to just come out from his fingertips. Then suddenly, the aura around the daggers grew, and the wind forming around dagger allowed the ends of the blade to grow and act more like a sword, piercing Quinn in both shoulders. The capped man pulled back and went for another strike. "I don't know what your ability is, but it's over," the capped man said. But then suddenly, his dagger had hit nothing but empty air and space, and no one could be seen. As he turned around, a sharp claw penetrated the man's stomach. Then another attack after attack at great speed was tearing his stomach apart, and to finish him off, 2 more blood swipes. 25 experience gained. 30 of 800 EXP. The man watching in the arena stood up on his feet as he saw his friend lose the match. The 2 of them so far had been on a winning streak, taking it in turns, facing opponent after opponent. The sudden loss had come as a shock to them. That skill at the end, what was that? Then, just as Quinn was about to log out and go find another match, he heard someone call out to him. "Wait!" The man in the seats shouted, "Please fight me." Quinn had no problem with this and accepted, but unknown to him, the man he was about to face was one of the strongest students from another military school. The student who had been sitting up in the stands and watching the fight between Quinn and his friend was known as Nate Snell. He was a second year from another academy, and in his academy, he was well known for being one of the strongest second years. Nate often played in the game to improve his fighting skills, as this was important for him due to the fact it went hand in hand with his ability. He was obsessed with learning all different types of martial arts skills. There was one area in the game that it didn't allow you to improve on, though. Even though the game allowed you to use abilities, it did not have the system in place to use soul weapons. This would be an almost impossible task considering every person's soul weapon was different, even if they had the same ability. With a keen eye for martial arts, the second Nate had seen Quinn perform his flash step. He needed to know who this person was. The footwork and the skill was so beautiful, so quick, that even he wasn't able to keep track of where Quinn had gone. After asking Quinn for a battle, he was overjoyed that he accepted. For the 2 of them to start their match, they needed to add each other to their friends list first. Heartsteely has sent you a friend request. Quinn accepted the friend request and was happy to fight. Honestly, Quinn wasn't too bothered who he went up against, but after fighting against Nate's friend, he felt like he should have a good match coming up that would help him improve. Blood Evolver has accepted your friend request. Blood Evolver? Does his ability have something to do with blood? That would explain those red lines coming out from his hands, but was there such an ability in the system? Nate thought. There were thousands of different abilities in the system. So Nate wasn't sure of all of them, but he had fought many battles in the game, and this was the first time seeing someone with this type of ability. Before the match was about to begin, Nate had asked if he could speak to his friend Sam for a few moments. Quinn agreed, as he wanted to check a few things out himself. During the match, when Quinn used his flash step, he was hoping his own system would show him something, but nothing happened. Of course, this was because he was in the game, but he knew that the flash step felt like it had taken a significant amount of stamina from him. His current stamina points were at a 12. If he was to make a rough guess, he would say that 4 strikes of Blood Swipe took down 1 stamina point, meaning he would be able to perform around 48 blood swipes before running out of stamina. However, if he did this, he would reach 0 HP before even using up all his stamina. But as the blonde man had said in the video, Flash Step took a considerable amount of stamina, and most Quinn knew he would currently only be able to produce it twice in one game, meaning it took at least 5 points of stamina. Quinn would have to think carefully when using this information in a match. At first, he thought it wasn't so important increasing his stamina, as long as he was strong enough or fast enough he could win his fights. But in a prolonged battle and matches against multiple enemies, as soon as his stamina dropped to 0, he would be as good as dead. Not only that, but Quinn dreaded the thought of having to fight in the sunlight with these stats. Over at the other end of the arena, Nate was busy talking to Sam about his match. "You are such a fool," Nate said. "I know, I'm sorry," Sam replied. Nate looked at the flapping cape that Sam was wearing and started to shake his head. "We just got this incredible thing, and you didn't even use it properly in the fight. When he went out from your view, if you hadn't turned around your back, it would have been protected. Or you could have turtled up with the cape. It's hard to get used to having something on your back. If someone vanishes in front of you and you know they're behind you, you naturally turn around. Wouldn't you?" Sam replied. Sam then started to look at the ground as he was saddened remembering how he had lost the match. "My win streak," Sam cried. Nate proceeded to pat Sam on the shoulder with pity before walking to his fighting spot. "You know the deal. If I win against him, then that means I win out bet. And you'll owe me those credits." As Sam headed back to the arena stands, he was praying for Quinn to kick his friend's ass. He had lost too many bets recently and was running low on credits. 3, 2, 1, and the match had begun. Surprisingly, both of them at the same time had decided to charge in. Although Quinn didn't know his opponent's abilities, his attacks were more effective closer in range. If he was going up against an elemental user, then it was always better for him to get closer anyway. And as soon as Quinn was within 5 meters, he threw out 2 blood swipes. Suddenly, Nat's speed dropped dramatically. His skin started to turn into a shiny material, and his footsteps were heavy. As the blood swipes reached and hit his body, the sound of metal clanging against each other was heard. For the first time when Quinn's attack had hit an opponent's body, it had done 0 damage whatsoever. The metal shine formed Nate's body seemed to shift and now was concentrated in his arm. It allowed Nate to move a lot faster and close the distance. He pushed his hand forward, and out came a long metal silver pole. It was too fast for Quinn to react to, and the pole dug into his stomach and continued to push him back. The attack was strong, and Quinn had lost about 10% of his health. The pole continued to grow and push him back, and his health continued to fall. Quinn then grabbed onto the pole with both hands and, using all his strength, managed to stop its momentum. "Wow, looks like you're strong as well," Nate said, surprised. Not only did his opponent have a ranged attack, but seemed to have super strength now as well. Quinn pushed the pole to the side and swung out his claws, this time firing 4 blood swipes. The pole then started to retract quicker than the blood swipes and absorb back into Nate's body. He then put both of his hands together, and the metal liquid started to form a large, oval shape and eventually formed a shield. Each strike hit the shield, and there was no effect. However, Quinn had expected this result. When Nate retracted the metal back into his body, Quinn was in front of him ready to strike, but Nate remained calm and shifted the metal over his body to the exact spot where Quinn was aiming for his head. The punch landed, but Nate's head didn't even move a single inch, and again the game had recorded no such damage. Nate then grabbed Quinn's fist and with his other hand formed the pole, whacking him to the ground. "Come on, you should be better than this," Nate said. The truth was Nate was purposely shifting the metal into a pole rather than a sword. This way the match would last longer. It had been a while since Quinn felt like this week. There was only one thing left for him to try. Quinn lifted himself off the ground and started to breathe in, calming himself down. Anger would only distract him. Then he was ready and Nate could see it too. "Come on," Nate said as he shifted the metal pole back into his body and into one of his fists. Quinn once again charged forward and threw out a blood swipe. Nate blocked the attack, easily lifting his arm and knocking it away, but it was only meant to serve as a distraction in the first place. When Quinn got close enough, Nate threw out his fist, and at the same time, he responded with flash step, avoiding the strike and appearing behind Nate. Too predictable. Nate had prepared for this after watching the last match and made sure his back was already fully covered in the metal-like alloy. Quinn then lifted his foot off the ground, let the energy go through from his toes up into his fist as he stomped down with one foot. He pulled back one hand and let out another fist. Asterisk bang. The sound of two solid objects hitting each other sounded loudly in the distance. For a brief second, the two of them was frozen in place, and for the first time, Quinn was able to do damage, and it was a lot. Nate's eyes grew in shock as he saw the attack bring his health down by nearly half. Nate knew he was in danger, and he could no longer take the fight as easy as he did before. He swung his body, and at the same time had shifted a piece of metal into a sword. But once again, Quinn had used the flash step to avoid the strike. Damn it again, how is he so fast? As Nate turned to look at where his opponent was, he was surprised to see Quinn collapsed on the ground. Quinn was breathing and heavy. He could no longer move. The use of using flash step twice, including the fact that he had used hammer strike, he had pushed his body way beyond its limits. "Let's do this again sometime," Nate said as he stabbed Quinn on the ground, ending the game. Although the match had ended in Nate's victory, he was more excited than ever. Looks like the military tournament is going to be a fun one this year. After finishing his intense battle with Nate, his hour using the VR capsule was up, and Quinn was no longer able to participate in any more matches. Although he had lost his match, he felt satisfied. He had learned a lot during his battle with Nate. His attacks, including his blood swipe, were not strong enough to do any damage to Nate while he using his metal ability. However, his hammer strike skill was. Hammer strike didn't increase his strength, but now Quinn had a good idea what it did do. It was an attack that focused on the inside, an internal attack, the perfect counter to those with abilities who hardened or transformed their bodies. Quinn couldn't wait to find out what the other tutorials the blonde man had in store for him, but he had no idea how to unlock them. The blonde man had simply said when he was ready, they would unlock for him. There were two things this meant. One might be when Quinn's stats were high enough to complete the fighting skills requirements, or when Quinn was a high enough level. The second lesson the fight had taught him was how important stamina was. The flash step was an incredible skill that allowed him to avoid a strike in an instant, but if he used it more than twice, then he would be done for, and if he was out in the sun, he wasn't even sure he would be able to use the skill at all. This made Quinn think long and hard about what to put his stat points into in the future. Perhaps going for an agility or strength-based character wasn't the best thing after all. With that in mind, Quinn had set up an important meeting with Layla today. There was one thing he needed to learn about more than anything, especially if he wanted to get stronger in the future. It was a Sunday, so Quinn still had the rest of the day off before having to go back to the standard military lessons for the week. The sun was out bright and early, and Quinn was standing outside the school gates, patiently waiting for Layla. Even though it was the weekend, Quinn still wore his school uniform, for he didn't have any other clothes other than what was provided to him, and he had long grown out of his old school uniform. "This damn sun," Quinn said while his body was covered in sweat. All current stats have been halved. Ever since he had evolved from a human into a halfling, the sun seemed to bother him even more. He was covered in sweat even though it wasn't that hot, and he was starting to have ringing headaches if he stayed outside too long. Finally, after waiting a while, Layla had arrived. She was wearing a beautiful red dress that showed off her long legs nicely along with her short hair. She still carried her bow and had her quiver by her side, and on her back was a fairly large bag. "You ready?" Layla asked, smiling. Quinn looked at the large bag on her back. It must have been heavy, he thought. "Do you want me to carry that for you?" Quinn asked, although with his stats halved and his strength draining from his body, he was hoping she would say no. "It's okay, the bag is lighter than you think. I'm using my ability to make it lighter," Layla replied. Quinn really wasn't sure if she was being truthful or not, and didn't really know what to do in these types of situations. Were you meant to insist and be pushy? Or be a gentleman like and offer a hand? Or listen to the girl, if she said she could do it, then she could do it. In the end, Quinn didn't want to think too hard about it, and decided to just let Layla carry on holding the heavy bag. If she wanted him to really carry the bag, then she should just ask him. The two of them walked out of the school's premise and carried on walking until they eventually reached a nice quiet park. There were some students outside messing around playing with their abilities, and at the same time, there was some military personal relaxing on the benches. "Peaceful, isn't it?" Layla said. "Yeah, it's kind of nice." Then a thought came into his head of all the news he had heard on TV about what life was like during the war, how it could start up again any second, and finally the death of his parents. "But who knows how long it will last? That's why I need to keep getting stronger." Layla placed the heavy bag on the ground, and it seemed like it was a weight off her shoulders. Even if she was using her ability, it would be tiring for someone to keep it up on the whole walk here. That's when Layla started to empty out all the contents in her bag. There were all sorts of things inside. There were several items of thick clothing, such as hats, scarves, sunglasses, and most of it seemed to be black in color. Then she continued to pull out even more stuff, lotions and lotions of sun cream, and finally she pulled out an umbrella. "Did it cost a lot?" Quinn asked, worried after seeing how much she had bought. "Don't worry about it. My family sent me the credits, and I used up what the Academy gave me," Layla replied. "Besides, I got it all from Marketplace, so it was dirt cheap." The Marketplace was an online store that was used all around the world. It sold your everyday items such as food, clothes, utilities, and other things. With the use of teleporters, your items were able to be shipped to you in almost an instant. As long as you could afford one of these, if not, you would have to go to a collection point. And the military school had one of these collection points for students to use. But other than just your everyday items, the Marketplace was also used by people to sell and buy beast weapons, skill books, ability books, and all sorts of things that would be beneficial to you in battles. However, to access this part of the Marketplace, you would either need military personal ID, which all students got a temporary one to use during their time there, or if you were a traveler. Travelers were people who didn't work for the military, but worked for a private company and often went into portals to explore different worlds. "So what do you want to try first?" Layla said, holding the sun cream in her hand. The two of them had gathered in the park, not just for a casual chat and peaceful evening, but there was a goal in mind. And although Quinn usually found Layla obsessive, it seemed like her crazy, strange self would come in handy. The whole purpose of today was to find out if there was any way to either reduce the effect that the sun had on the system, or even temporarily stop it altogether, and there was no one better than Layla for the job. She knew everything about vampires, having grown up reading about them. She ordered whatever she thought might have been effective. Quinn looked at all the items that she had brought over. He then noticed a few more things on the ground with her. There was a metal-shaped cross, a clove of garlic, and even a piece of silver jewelry. "Oh, those are for later," Layla said, embarrassed, noticing Quinn staring at her stuff. "We should also try to find out if you have any other weaknesses of normal vampires as well." "All right, why don't we just try the umbrella first?" Quinn said as he knelt down to pick it up. He then stood still and popped open the umbrella. It was solid black in color to make sure that most of the light didn't penetrate or get through it. Quinn then adjusted the umbrella a few times to make sure his body was completely covered in the shadow. Then, to his surprise, stats have returned to normal. While Quinn was fully covered under the shade, his stats had returned. Then he lifted his hand and placed it outside the shade zone ever so slightly, and as soon as the tiniest part of his finger was outside, the same usual status screen had appeared. "You are being affected by direct sunlight. All stats will be halved." Well, Layla asked. It works, but even if a little bit of my body is in the sun, then I start to feel weak. This wouldn't do. Holding the umbrella, although would return his stats, it would be difficult to use in a fight. One hand would be occupied holding the umbrella while the other would be free. Also, it was a big weak target that the enemy could easily destroy. But at least he found out that if he just carried an umbrella with him, he would no longer feel weak. It was a good idea to keep one on him for now. That's a special umbrella. Layla said it's one used to block out the UV from the sun, although at most it can block out about 90%, it's not perfect. To be honest, I'm surprised it worked. Is the UV rays why I feel weak then? Not necessarily. I mean, vampire lore is all over the place, but these myths had to ground it somewhere, right? Layla then looked at the ground and picked up the sun cream. If the umbrella really worked because of the UV, then the sun cream should have some effect. Layla then walked up to Quinn, squirting some of the cream onto her hand. You ready? Quinn then went a little red, thinking about Layla applying the cream onto his body. Looking at Layla now, out of her school uniform, he realized she was kind of cute. So what, she was a little strange and knew too much about vampires. Everyone had their geeky thing they knew about and was obsessed with. Then Quinn felt something cold on his leg. She had taken Quinn's silence as a yes and started to slather the cream all over his body, after making sure everywhere she could see covered in cream. To finish it off, she placed sunglasses over Quinn's eyes. Although we can stop the UV on your eyelids, we can't on your eyeballs. Layla said, well, anything? This time, there was no such result. When opening up his status, the UV cream hadn't even made a little bit of impact. Quinn still felt incredibly weak, and his stats were still halved. So, it looks like it's not to do with the UV then. Although the umbrella worked, it can only block so much of the UV, and same with the cream. So I was hoping it would have some effect, but this means it's most likely some other property in the sun that we don't know about. To be honest, Quinn was thankful that the sun cream didn't work. The idea of waking up every day and doing it as a daily routine, at some point the cream would wear off too. He also couldn't imagine in the middle of the fight asking his opponent to wait to lather and cream himself all over. He had pictures in his head of asking Vorden to cover for him while he brought out a bottle of sun cream. Finally, it was time for the last test. This one Quinn was dreading the most, the clothes test. He was already sweating and feeling hot as it was, and couldn't imagine putting on a load of black clothing. But he thought it was best to get it over and done with as soon as possible. First, Quinn placed a sweater over the top of his body, then a pair of black, thick trousers. On his feet, instead of trainers, he changed to black boots, then on his hand, a pair of leather black gloves. Finally, on his head, he had a large back top hat. Looking at him, Layla could barely hold her laughter. He looked absolutely ridiculous. Breathe, Layla. She mumbled. Well, anything? No, not yet anyway. Well, we might as well try the rest. Layla then continued to place clothes on Quinn. This time she had covered his face with a balaclava, and even where his eyes were, she had put a sleeping mask on. More hats were placed on, and now every inch of his skin was covered. Anything? No, Quinn shouted, but it sounded muffled through the clothes. However, Layla didn't give up yet. She felt like if the umbrella had worked, then this had to work as well. She continued to place all the remaining clothes she had brought with, and then finally, while Layla was piling on the clothes, Quinn managed to shout something. Wait, it's working, Quinn said. Although the clothes had worked, Quinn was around 3 inches thick in black clothing. Layla quickly helped Quinn take off all the clothing, as it seemed like he was a bit wobbly on his legs and was going to pass out any second now. Once the two of them were finished, Quinn opened up the umbrella and the energy started to restore back into his body again. The two of them sat down on the clean-cut grass and were discussing the results of the test. Well, you can't go out like that. Layla said, you couldn't move in the thing. Agreed, but at least we know that the most important thing is to stop the sun hitting me. Quinn started to feel the umbrella, wondering if perhaps he could get clothes made out of the same material. Then the problem would be the material would be too weak. Most likely the reason the clothes didn't work so well was because they didn't block out the sun enough. He needed more solid but flexible material. There was some stuff out there that might have worked, like a black latex suit or something, but these weren't strong enough for fighting. It could easily be torn or ripped, and then he would be back to being normal wee Quinn again. Suddenly a thought had entered Quinn's mind. He started to remember the fight he had inside the VR game. When he had gone against Sam, he had used a cape that was able to block his blood swipe. The material was not only flexible, but strong as well. The cape was most likely made from some type of beast from one of the portals. If Quinn could get enough of this material, maybe he could make a suit of some kind that could not only protect him from the sun, but also be strong enough to be used in combat. A smile started to appear on his face. He now couldn't wait to be transported to hunt some beasts. After finishing the test with the items, Layla was eager to try out a few of the other things she had brought along with her. "Do I really have to worry about something like this?" Quinn said as he picked up a clove of garlic. "Not really. To be honest, I just wanted to try out everything. Garlic always acted more as a repellent in the first place, and the fact that you're holding it like that would suggest it wouldn't hurt." While Quinn looked at the piece of garlic, he decided to use the inspect skill on just to be sure. If something would harm him, he was sure the system would be able to tell him basic information, such as this. Inspect. A glove of garlic. Due to your heightened senses, the piece may test extremely bad. Safe to consume. The good news was the system had informed him that the garlic wasn't poisonous, which meant it would be able to do with the other items as well. The bad news was that he had to still eat the garlic so Layla didn't get suspicious. He broke the glove into a small piece before placing it into his mouth. The taste was incredibly strong. It felt like he was eating dog crap. Not that he knew how that tasted anyway, but if he had to imagine this was it. Quinn immediately started to spit on the ground, trying to get the taste out of his mouth. "Well, at least you look fine," Layla said. Quinn had actually expected this result before even using his inspect skill. The taste of food had slightly changed ever since his evolution. Sweet food, such as ice cream and cakes, now tasted bland. It was the same with fruit. The only thing that still tasted fine for him was meat. Although everything seemed to taste slightly saltier than before, it was the same with other herbs as well. Although there was one thing that drastically changed for him, and that was blood. It was a greater taste than anything he had before and was sweet as caramel itself. Just thinking about it, Quinn wanted another taste, but he was still able to control himself just fine. It was the same way when someone thought about chocolate. They suddenly wanted chocolate, but they didn't need it. Before touching any of the other items, Quinn made sure to use his inspect skill on each one. First was the metal cross, a religious symbol that has no effect, the system said. Then the chain, a sliver chain that is made up of 92% silver. Wearing the item can be used as a fashion accuracy. With both the items, there was no such warning. Quinn then proceeded to pick up both of them with no worry. He was starting to trust the system more and more lately, as it had been more helpful and accurate. "So what's the story behind these two things?" Quinn asked. "I kind of get the cross, but what about the silver, and they just for werewolves?" Suddenly Layla's eyes started to sparkle up. "I'm glad you asked. Vampire lore has gone further back than you think. Even in Greek mythology, they have tales of vampires. The first vampire was said to be cursed by the god Apollo, to be burnt by sunlight. Then when the man tried to touch Artemis' bow, she cursed the human further to be affected by silver." Layla explained, "Of course there are other reasons, but this is one of the older ones." Then with the cross, vampires have always been seen as workers of the devil, a creature that needed to suck blood to live, and of course God in the eyes of many, is a fighter of evil, and the cross is a symbol of the god. Layla then grabbed both items from Quinn and placed it back in her bag. "But now looking at you, I can clearly see all of that was a load of rubbish," Layla said, sounding a bit disappointed by the whole experience. "The only vampire weakness it seems you have so far is sunlight. Although I have to admit, that's a pretty big one. Do you feel like you're not getting older yet?" "What?" Quinn said, confused. "How would I even know? It's only been a few days. I mean, I don't feel any older, but I could say that about the rest of my life. You kind of just got older without realizing it." Then a dreaded thought had entered Quinn's mind. If it was true that he would no longer age, did that mean his appearance would stay the same as it did now? Would he look like a young teenage boy for the rest of his life? With test over, it was time for the two of them to head back to their dorm rooms. Quinn decided to head back to the dorm rooms and see if Vorden and Peter wanted to hang out and do something for the rest of the evening. But when he entered the room, once again, neither Vorden or Peter was there. Vorden, Quinn didn't worry too much about. It seemed like he had been getting into trouble lately with his second years, but currently they were staying well clear of him after the incident. It was Peter Quinn was more worried about. He couldn't help but shake the feeling that these new friends of Peter weren't actually friends of his and was wondering what to do. With that, Quinn decided to sleep for the night and wait till the next day. When he woke up, he was happy to see that the other two had managed to return to their rooms in the middle of the night. For once the three of them had decided to head down to the canteen together, and in a long time, the three of them casually eat food and chatted about what they had done yesterday. Once the three of them had finished eating, it was time for them to head to their homeroom classes together. On Monday morning, they were to attend a morning class with their teacher, Delaware. This lesson would be a theory-based lesson, either the history of the human race or even notice about what would happen. The three of them sat in the back of the class, as usual, while Layla sat at the front with Aaron by her side. The students waited patiently until Del had finally arrived. "All right, class, I have an important announcement to make. The preparations for your first portal outing has been complete. It's time for you kids to go explore the universe a bit more." Before Del was to inform the students about the portal training they would be participating in. He needed to explain to the students how the portals worked. After all, it would be a first for nearly every student there apart from few of them. Portals allowed humans to travel to and back from locations that they had been to before. They were often used to travel to other planets. The technology was obtained when humanity managed to take down their first Dalki ship and discovered a portal inside. Usually, when such advanced technology was discovered, people wouldn't be able to dissect and replicate it so easily. Just because you had the technology didn't mean you understood how it worked. But thanks to a legendary scientist named Richard Eno, he had easily been able to dissect all of the equipment found on board of the ship. Another great contributor to the war against the Dalki. Some people assumed that he had an ability of some sort that helped him along the way, but these were just rumors, and no one knew for sure. However, one thing for certain was he was a great man. Once he had found this technology, he distributed it not only to the military, but also to private companies as well. He made sure that such power wouldn't just end up in one group's hands. Back then, the world and humans were fighting together, but who knew what would happen once the war had ended? In today's world, there were generally three different groups of people who had and owned portals. The military was the first group. Next were private corporations. They usually had powerful originals backing them. Many of these companies would also form a faction, a group of powerful travelers just for exploring other planets. And lastly was the group known as Pure, a group that didn't believe in the use of abilities. There were three types of portals, each different in color. There was green, orange, and red. Each of these portals meant a different thing. Green meant that the planet it led to had already been explored, and there were human shelters that had been built. These allowed people to live there if they wished, or just stay there temporarily. The next was orange. This meant that the planet hadn't been fully explored yet. There were some shelters in place, but the level of the beast could be too high in certain areas, or they just hadn't explored everywhere yet. And finally, the red portals. These were unexplored planets. There were no shelters for regular humans to live in. Only travelers or military personnel would usually go into these portals for exploration, and the worst thing about them was they didn't know if the Dalki were on the planet as well. After all, the Dalki had the same technology, so it wouldn't be too strange to run into them, and although under a treaty, if a few people were to go missing on an unknown planet, it was hard to prove something had happened, and the humans weren't ready for another war just yet. And that is all the information you need to know about portals, Del said. A student then raised his hand who seated in the center of the class. "Yes," Del said. "What about the beasts that were discovered on those planets? Will we learn about them?" The student asked. "For now, that's all you need to know about the portals. Yes, this also led us to discover beasts on these planets, and they're what we use to create our beast weapons, but you'll be told more detail about that when you arrive." Del explained, although I will tell you now that you can also thank Richard Eno for that discovery as well. Del then closed the presentation that was playing behind him. Now for the important part. The portal expedition will take place next week, but before even that, You will be required to form your own team of 5. Although on this trip you will travel as a class, you must have a squad and stick together. Even the green portals are a dangerous place filled with beasts, and the trackers on your watch will not work outside the academy. We will have no way to come and save you. The same student once again raised his hand, and Dell had a look on his face like it was starting to get annoying. Yes. Do you know where we will be going? That information will be revealed to you on the day. Many of you here have family members who, if they knew where you were, would send guards out to protect you on these planets, but that wouldn't be fair, especially since we will also be assessing you on this. The student once again raised his hand, but Dell this time stared at him back, forcing him to slowly put his hand down again. Now, if there aren't any more questions, your combat classes for today are canceled. Today, you are to form a team of 5 and report back to us by the end of the day. Dell then left the room to attend to other business while allowing the students to form their own group of 5s. Vorden then turned his head immediately. Hey, Quinn, you want to be on the... But standing by Quinn's side already was Layla, who had sprinted from the front of the class to the back. For Weevil.com. Hey, do you want to make a team with me, Quinn? Layla said, smiling. Sure, Quinn answered. Truthfully, Quinn wanted to ask Layla to be on the same team. They didn't know how long their first assessment was going to take, and if he was to get hurt or injured, he was going to need a blood source of some type. Even if Vorden didn't like it, he knew this was going to happen. Hey, Quinn, you mind if I join as well? He said, smiling, trying to hide his annoyance. Of course, and Peter as well. Peter's face was a little shocked at hearing the sound of his name, and at the same time his feelings were confused. Yeah, that'll be good, Peter said. Then when the others were just thinking about who the 5th member should be, Aaron had approached Vorden of all people in the room. I want to make a team with you. Not only were Quinn and the others shocked that Aaron had approached Vorden, but so was the whole class. In Dell's class, Aaron was the strongest student there. Nearly everyone wanted her on their team, but over the last few days, when people had tried to approach her, she had always given a cold response. It seemed like she was disinterested in everything apart from getting stronger. I'm sorry, Vorden said, but I've already decided to make a team with these guys. Vorden's response to Aaron seemed to be even crazier to everyone else as well. They had seen Vorden fight that day when they were surrounded by the second years. After witnessing that, no one would say he was any weaker than Aaron. If the two of them were to combine powers and found a few other strong people, it meant they could easily come up with the strongest team in the class. Aaron then looked at the group of people who Vorden pointed at. To be honest, she didn't seem to recognize any of them. Who are they? Aaron said. What? We took the test together. I even helped you out at the assembly hall. Layla complained. The truth was Aaron never took the time to remember people's faces. She only cared about those who were strong. When she saw how weak they were in the test assessment, she didn't even bother with them any longer. Although there was one person who had caught her eye other than Vorden, and that was Quinn. She remembered him throwing the black beast balls at a lightning-fast speed and taking out a student. Then when she looked at his wrist, she saw he was only a level 1 user. Why would you stay with these weak people? Surely you can get a better grade if you join me and a few others, Aaron said. The first assessment and future assessments in the portal outing would determine their final grade. For those who had a cozy family to get back to, it didn't matter too much, but to rest it determined their future. The grade they got when they left military academy would decide whether they could join a strong private company or whether they would just end up joining the bottom of the barrel being treated even worse than now. I don't care about the grades. I just want to have fun while I'm still in school, Vorden replied. But Aaron was determined to not give up. Fine, I can accept the girl and the strangely strong boy, but I can't accept him, Aaron said, pointing at Peter. Peter's heart suddenly started to thump louder. A fear started to take over him as he heard Aaron speak these words. If he didn't get in Vorden's and Peter team, he would be in huge trouble. Why do we need you anyway? Vorden said. Wait a minute, Layla interrupted. I think she would make a good addition to the team. Besides Vorden, doesn't your ability rely on those around you to be strong as well? As far as I remember, Beast doesn't have abilities, so you would have to rely on us. And we don't exactly have strong abilities. Layla, I understand what you are saying, but for once I agree with Vorden, Quinn replied. I don't care how strong she is. She can't just come in and kick one of us out. She can join the team, but only if Peter stays. It was good to have strong allies, but at what cost? If Quinn was to kick out Peter to replace him with a stranger, he would just be as bad as everyone else who had treated him like crap just for being weak. He didn't want to change into one of those types of people. Erin then started to look around the room before looking at Vorden once again. She thought back to how Vorden was able to deal with Momo quite well before the use of the soul weapon. After looking around the room, there didn't seem to be a single person in Dell's class that matched up to him. Fine, I will join, but I wish for the 5 of us to have a retesting to see where we stand, Erin asked. Perhaps we can go visit the training center, display what we can do to the rest. Layla and Quinn looked at each other with a half-worried look in their eye. The 5 of them then headed down to the training center. It was the same place that Layla had first spotted Quinn, who had sneaked in the place at night. Right now the room was filled with multiple different people from all sorts of different classes. All the other classes had also been informed about the upcoming test and had decided to find out what each other's abilities were. This would give them the best chance of defeating and capturing as many beasts as possible and increasing their chances of survival. Well, what do you want us to do? Vorden asked. I've already seen your powers, but I can't remember too much about the girl and the other 2. Perhaps the girl can go first on strength machine. Layla went up, as asked, and went to the large circular strength machine. She concentrated her mind, and threw out her fist at the same time. She used the force of her telekinesis to push her hand as strong as she could. The numbers slowly went up on the machine's display until it had eventually reached number 8. Damn it, same as last time. Looks like I haven't improved much, Layla complained. For a level 2, that's quite a weak strength score, but judging by the bow you're a ranged user anyway, it will be quite handy to have someone like you on the team, Erin said. She then walked up to the 2 boys, Quinn and Peter. Well, I'm hoping that both of you can at least get the same score as her. Quinn was starting to get annoyed by all her taunts, but he took a deep breath and held it in. With her on the team, it would cause fewer troubles with the others. Even if they did defeat beasts and obtain their crystals, there was a high chance that another team might target them and try to steal them. But just having Erin on the team would stop that. Peter walked up to the machine, holding the mud staff in his hand. Looks like he's still level 1 then, Erin said. Level 1 Earth user didn't have the ability to extract Earth from the ground. All they could do was reform the Earth in their hand. They could only control Earth they were touching rather than the Earth around them. As Peter went to punch the machine, the Earth around from the pole started to form around his fist. As he hit the machine, the numbers started to go up, and finally, it stopped at 8. The same score as Layla. Well, what are you waiting for? Erin said, looking at Quinn.